Hi, I'm Denise Durel, the President and CEO of United Way of Southwest Louisiana, and I would like to welcome you to our FEMA Appeals webinar. Many people in our region are continuing to struggle during the recovery phase and aftermath of Hurricanes Laura and Delta. So it is our hope that tonight we can offer some wisdom and guidance to help you make sure that you receive the maximum allowable reward from FEMA. Tonight, you will hear from Evan Anthony, who is a Client Services Coordinator with SBP. SBP is an organization headquartered in New Orleans that was founded in St. Bernard Parish following Hurricane Katrina as the St. Bernard Project. That eventually became a national organization with a goal to shrink the time between disaster and recovery. Members of the SBP team now assist with all types of disasters near and far. Immediately following Evan's presentation, we will have a question and answer period. Please be sure to type your questions in our chat box, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. But just in case you need additional individualized help after tonight, we will be hosting an in-person clinic next week on Wednesday, April the 28th at the Civic Center. Volunteers from United Way and SBP will be there to review your file and to help with guidance and support. But appointments are required, and you can schedule your appointment by going to our website at unitedwayswla.org/FEMA clinic. Now, I would like to turn things over to Evan.
Thanks, Denise. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Appreciate the introduction and excited to be here to share a little bit of what we've learned at SBP. As Denise mentioned, SBP stands for the St. Bernard Project. Really what we are is a national disaster recovery and home rebuilding nonprofit based out of New Orleans. We were founded after Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. We have offices in Houston, in Panama City, in New York, New Jersey, Bahamas, and Puerto Rico. And our mission is to shrink the time between disaster and recovery. So what we've been doing here in Southwest Louisiana has really started since Hurricane Laura hit in late August, and through working with homeowners of Lake Charles and Calcasieu Parish, as well as interacting with FEMA, we've learned a lot about the FEMA Appeals process, and really excited to share some of what we've learned. This webinar is really, the synthesis of that, what we've learned as an organization as we're helping our clients through that rebuild process. And so just a little bit of context for everyone that's joining us here today. So SBP, like I mentioned, is a national nonprofit. We have 5 things that we do, 5 interventions. First and foremost, we rebuild. We rebuild homes. Our mission is to get homeowners back into their home if they meet certain criteria for our rebuild programs. We share information. That's part of what we're doing here today. As we learn, we like to pass that information on. It's one of our values as an organization, and a big part of what we do is sharing the things that we learn and try to help everyone be able to navigate the disaster recovery process. We prepare, and we do preliminary trainings before disaster season, before hurricane season. We make sure to share and prepare organizations, individuals, and then we advise. Government programs. We have communications with FEMA, with local governments, with key stakeholders in the communities where we work, and then we advocate. And that's a lot of what we've done here in Southwest Louisiana, is advocate for folks who need some assistance, especially when it comes to FEMA. Next slide, please. So today's webinar is really focused on 5 things. Number 1, just a brief overview of the individual assistance program with FEMA and what that means for homeowners. Number 2, the FEMA Appeals process, how you get from point A to point B, and a lot of the steps along the way to make sure that you're addressing everything that you need to address in the FEMA Appeals process. Number 3, a brief overview of more common FEMA denial codes. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that have logged on that have wondered one thing or another when it comes to why they've either been denied or there's been delays in that FEMA appeals process. So we'll go over those common denial codes, how to structure a FEMA appeal. And this is going to be a brief overview with more specific questions. Just want to, reiterate the in-person clinic, as well as some resources that we'll share at the end for folks that need individual assistance. Everyone's FEMA appeal will look and feel different depending on the circumstances, but there's some bigger themes that we'll cover here today to make sure that everyone has the tools that they need to structure that FEMA appeal letter, and then some tips, tricks, and frequently asked questions at the end. So that's what we're going to be covering. Our goal here today is to share those best practices with you all. So we really want to leave adequate time at the end for folks to ask questions and get some answers. And we're not going to be able to answer everything here when it comes to specific needs or the ins and outs of any specific FEMA appeal letter. So just want to reiterate again, if you have those questions, we'll share a couple of resources at the end, an email, a couple of emails, a couple of websites, some resources for you all, and then of course the in-person clinic that Denise mentioned. Our goal is really just to give you all some resources for a successful FEMA appeal. And I'll just mention that in the work that we've done at SBP, we've been able to leverage over $100,000 for individuals to go towards rebuilding their home. And so what we're doing is really based in our experience and in our success in navigating and advocating for our clients through the FEMA appeals process. All right, so number 1, I just want to mention that I don't speak for FEMA. I speak as a representative of SBP. So this is just an overview of the FEMA Individual and Households Assistance Program. When FEMA declares a disaster, that opens up funds for either public use or individual use. And so the Individuals and Households Assistance Program is what you all are most likely dealing with and navigating when it comes to receiving home repairs assistance money, personal properties money, reimbursements, rental assistance. That's all coming from this program. FEMA, just to put it up front, FEMA is not an insurance company. It's a government entity. It's not a charity. It's not a home makeover program. This program is designed to meet the essential needs of homeowners to bring them back into a safe, habitable, and healthy environment at home, not necessarily a pre-disaster condition. So what does that mean for homeowners? Number 1, it means that it's not always going to feel like you're getting everything that you want. From FEMA's position, it's not necessarily about getting you exactly what you feel that you want, but it's more about the needs of the individual to be able to live at home in a safe and healthy environment. It's not an insurance company, so they don't duplicate insurance benefits. And it's not a charity. It's not a nonprofit. So pleading the case or making the case for yourself is, of course, an important part of the process, but there's some tips and tricks and verbiage that you can use to be able to move through the FEMA process without resorting to saying, please consider me, I'm begging you. There's really some important lingo that we'll cover over the course of this presentation here. All right, so that's a little brief overview of the Individuals and Households Program. So FEMA Appeals is essentially the way that FEMA goes about communicating through the course of you receiving your benefits. A FEMA appeal is also necessary if you feel that you haven't received a fair award, or you've been denied for reasons that either you disagree with, or frankly that sometimes you don't understand. So FEMA appeals are really important to work through. We've had clients who have said things like they don't, bother going through the FEMA appeals process, to which we say, definitely want to go through that FEMA appeals process to make sure that you are receiving all of the benefits that you're entitled to based off of certain requirements. So very briefly, in every FEMA appeal, it's important to request an additional inspection of your home. FEMA will move the process forward once they've received a report from an inspector who acknowledges that there is the damage to the dwelling that you report that there is. And there's some ways to do that. Number one, you can have a contractor come and do an estimate on your home. It can be a roofing contractor who takes a look at the roof, a plumber who can take a look at the piping and anything that's going wrong. If, say, there's strong winds or there's a tree that falls and damages some things at your house, an interior contractor. So there's ways that you can fit together the necessary documents and things that you need to move forward a FEMA appeal in a successful way. It's really important to be succinct. After a disaster, the emotions are flowing, and you look around the community, you think about what has been damaged in the home, and we acknowledge how difficult that can be. But in terms of submitting a successful FEMA appeal, it being succinct and to the point is very, very important. It breaks it down in the simplest terms for someone who is reviewing your case from FEMA to be able to see exactly what it is that you're appealing. In that appeal letter, you need to include estimates. So the way that FEMA understands the damages to your home, number one is with an in-person or remote inspection. Number two, and this is not an exhaustive list, by the way, is verifying those contractor estimates with the contractors themselves, just to verify that the damages are what they determine that they are. Sometimes there's things that seem like it's a bigger issue than it is, or that there's something that's really a bigger issue than you believe that it is. So that's where it's really important to have contractors come in, do a damage assessment of your home, request an additional inspection from FEMA to come in and make sure that it's being covered, in those regards. If you have insurance, the most important part, or there's really two important parts. Number one is the insurance declarations page. That's your policy declarations. That lists for FEMA exactly what it is that you are covered for dwelling, other structures, additional living expenses. That page breaks it down for FEMA. So what we've learned in working in Lake Charles and Southwest Louisiana is that that's not always an easy page to come by. With some companies, some bigger insurance companies, you can log on to the website. You can find it in your insurance policy if you have that in print form. For other companies, it can be, in local companies, it can be a little bit more difficult to get that declarations page. So understand that in navigating FEMA, there's some other things along the way that you're going to have to navigate. One of them being working with your insurance company to send you that declarations page. If you do not have insurance, you need to include a statement that states, I did not have insurance coverage at the time of the disaster. I did not have homeowners insurance at the time of the disaster. That is going to take the place of insurance. Like I mentioned, FEMA doesn't duplicate insurance benefits. And the way that they understand whether or not they're duplicating benefits is through that page or through a statement saying that you did not have insurance, so there's no benefits to duplicate. Really important point. We've had folks that we've worked with who have been denied, say, because FEMA deems that their dwelling is habitable. And it's not a perfect process. There's things that happen along the way that need to be appealed. And then that client or that homeowner will send in photos to show FEMA that there's significant damages where they say that there are. However, there really always needs to be a request for additional inspection, because that is the way that FEMA will verify that the damages are to the extent that they are. So sending in photos is not necessarily the way to make the point. And we'll get more into that a little bit later on. And then finally, it's really important to submit everything in a FEMA appeal in one file, not as separate attachments. For example, you write your FEMA appeal, you submit it, you get your contractor estimates, you submit it, you get photos of your home, you submit it. No, no, no. It's really important that all of the supporting documentation for that FEMA appeal exists in one file that you can make on your computer. And then you can use that file, you can upload that file to the website or fax it into FEMA, or you can mail it into FEMA, depending on what you've selected to be your preferred method of correspondence. Okay, and we'll get more into those details. Next slide, please. So FEMA considers a denial not necessarily to be the start of a conversation, because there's many times where FEMA will approve you for rebuild assistance, for rental assistance, for miscellaneous items, for emergency assistance right off the bat. And so it's not necessarily a denial that kickstart the conversation, but as soon as you receive a decision from FEMA, that moves the process forward. That can come in the form of a denial, but it can also come in the form of a decision. We've had homeowners who've had, by our estimate, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of damage and only received, say, $5,000 in their first application to FEMA, to which they started to appeal and then received more money. So the FEMA appeal process is a back and forth. It's communication. It's a conversation between the homeowner and FEMA, submitting documents along the way in the form of FEMA appeals that moves the whole process forward. A denial doesn't mean that you aren't eligible or that you don't receive assistance. So an attitude of sticking with it is really important with FEMA. And that can be especially difficult right after a disaster or in the following weeks or months. That is not necessarily an easy thing. But that's where we really encourage our clients and homeowners and renters, anyone who has who's eligible to apply for FEMA assistance, to stick with it. Sometimes there's some communication lags, and we'll get into that too with tips and tricks. But it's really important to stick with the FEMA appeal process to make sure that you're receiving everything that you're entitled to. Before you appeal FEMA, make sure that you have the things that you need. Pay really special, careful attention to what FEMA says is the reason you've received certain funds or been denied for certain funds. And then based off of that, gather the appropriate documentation all together into one document. For example, if you have insurance, get your declarations page. Get your insurance settlement. Make sure that you have everything from your insurance company in front of you before you start sending things off to FEMA. Take a minute, gather everything for the FEMA appeal process. Number two, make sure that you request your file from FEMA and make sure that you are selecting your preferred method of correspondence. Some of us are more tech savvy, in which case you can set up an account at disasterassistance.gov, or if you prefer to correspond via mail and back and forth, or send things in via fax, that's an appropriate way to interact with FEMA as well. But make sure that you understand how you best want to interact with FEMA. And then, of course, make sure that you're timely. There are time constraints in working through the FEMA appeals process, and it's important to remain on time, and it's important always to be at the ready for FEMA to call. After, maintain copies of all documents, request your file from FEMA, and keep records of your communication with FEMA, okay? Those are just important accounting tips, and one of the big things we run into is one document is in one place, another document's in another place. It's in your car, it's in a drawer, it's in storage, it's in that, it was under the bed in a box somewhere, and there might be water dripping in from the ceiling and making those documents wet. So make sure that afterwards, it's an important time, take a step back, keep everything organized, and have all of that in one place. All right, next slide, please. FEMA denial codes. This is how FEMA will communicate to you how you should appeal. So in every FEMA letter and denial, there is a code given that has certain rules, if you will, to follow in terms of how you work through that appeal. The big five are: could not prove occupancy or ownership, could not verify identity, insurance, adequate insurance coverage, or what's called HAP status, and that's where you have to apply for an SBA loan. And we'll get into exactly what those mean. Number one, occupancy not verified, ownership not verified. I'm sure there's plenty of people that are on this call that have had to work through this, and sometimes it can be difficult and frustrating, and just want to acknowledge that we understand that. FEMA needs to verify that you are the principal occupant and owner of the dwelling if you're a homeowner. So what that means is there's folks that have inherited homes through grandparents or parents, haven't gone through a succession process. There are certain that property taxes aren't in your name, they're in your spouse's name, or say they're in your mom or dad's name, or they're in your grandparents' name or great-grandparents' name, and you've never had that transferred over. So when FEMA is looking at what you've submitted to them, if there's different names, even though you know exactly who they are, that doesn't mean FEMA is going to know exactly who they are. And so that's where you have to verify that you are the primary occupant. There's a couple ways that you can do that: through property taxes, through utility bills, say an electric bill, a gas bill, a water bill that have your name on it. And then in ownership, you have a title to your house, a deed, a bill of sale, a succession, or your name is stated in a will. Those are all important documents that you'll need for a FEMA, in your FEMA appeal for occupancy not verified or ownership not verified. If you've failed an identity verification, this is where you'd have to submit official government documents like a social security statement, taxes, copy of your driver's license, so that they know that you are who you say you are. Next slide, please. Another really common one is that you're insured or ineligible due to insurance coverage. As I mentioned at the beginning, FEMA does not duplicate benefits. So if you're covered for dwelling, if you're covered for additional living expenses, and you're asking FEMA for home repairs assistance money, if, for example, you're covered up to $80,000 for dwelling and you have $10,000 available to you through additional living expenses, if you're paying into your insurance program, you are entitled to those benefits through insurance. And so FEMA isn't necessarily the right path for you in certain circumstances. That really what is important is that you're working with the insurance company to receive the benefits that you've paid towards in paying your premium each month, right? Sometimes folks only have limited insurance. Sometimes folks only have, say, insurance for personal property. That's where it's really, really important that if you're appealing FEMA because you're insured, that you're showing them the declarations page to show I am only covered for personal property and not for home repairs or dwelling. To which case you write the FEMA appeal letter, you submit those documents in one file to FEMA, and then you play through the process of communicating with FEMA through the appeals process. Another one, SBA. FEMA will make a determination on your ability to get yourself back into a safe, habitable, and healthy environment. So what FEMA will do is kick you over to SBA, and SBA will run a financial background check to verify whether or not you have financial means to be able to put yourself back into a habitable home. So we've often worked with clients who've been routed to the SBA, and then once they've received a decision from the SBA, if, say, they're approved, and we've had clients that have been approved for $80,000, $120,000, and then that is a proper route because the Small Business Administration has determined that you have adequate income or financial standing to take on a loan, get yourself back at home, and repay that low interest loan over time. However, SBA isn't a guarantee, and if they deny you for the loan, then you take that SBA denial and you submit it to FEMA within the disaster, your disaster page, say for Hurricane Laura or Hurricane Delta, showing that you've been denied for SBA for an SBA loan, and then you can move the FEMA appeal process forward that way. So you need to provide proof of your application and then determination of whether or not you've been approved or denied. And then there's the tricky one of insufficient damage or reported no damage. To use a specific example, we have a client whose home was severely damaged, and she received a FEMA denial saying that there was not sufficient damage to the dwelling. From her perspective, she couldn't move back in. There's mold in the house, there's drywall hanging, there's insulation hanging. So it doesn't always work like clockwork. Sometimes there's mistakes, sometimes there's insufficient evidence that's reported. Sometimes if you have a contractor estimate that's not looking at certain things, not acknowledging that there's really important issues with the home that make it difficult to occupy, that sometimes this denial code will come up, that there's not sufficient damage to warrant more home repairs monies. So what do? You don't just drop it and think that's the end of it. You appeal. You appeal, you appeal, you appeal. You make your case, and you submit a FEMA appeal showing that there is substantial damage to your dwelling. And that's how you move the process forward. And we've done that, and clients have received additional money from FEMA when at first it seemed like there was no route forward. There's always a route. Okay, the FEMA appeals letter. There's some nuance here and we're not going to cover everything when it comes to moving and storage, when it comes to transportation, if there are there's specific circumstances for home repairs. So this is just a brief overview. Again, encouraging everyone who's on the call right now to join us for the in-person clinic to go over any specifics with your FEMA appeal. But number one, you will always need to include in your appeals letter, I hereby declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. Every document that you submit to FEMA has to have this statement, because that is sort of the sworn oath that what you're submitting is true, that what you're submitting is completely legitimate, that you are who you say you are, that everything that you're appealing is for just cause. And so that statement is really important. It's part of the lingo for FEMA, and there will be more of that as we keep talking here, that moves the process forward. If you don't have that statement, then there isn't the element of legality that needs to be included in every FEMA appeals letter. It's not about please. It's not about I'm begging you. It's not about I pray that you can help me. And sometimes that's the tough truth. You have to include certain verbiage in your FEMA appeals letter to move everything forward. In your letter to FEMA, make sure that you have a FEMA registration number and the disaster number. For example, for Hurricane Laura, DR-4559-LA is the disaster number. Your FEMA registration number. There's a lot of folks who are on this call that have applied for Hurricane Laura and Hurricane Delta and the severe winter storm. Make sure that when you're appealing a certain decision that you have the correct FEMA registration number if you're dealing with multiple disasters. And we never, we wish that no one has to go through multiple disasters at a time, but that's where some accounting is really important. Always include your FEMA registration number. That is what links you to your FEMA appeal and all of the correspondence with FEMA. Include 4 digits of your social security number. That's a unique identifier of you. Include your birth date and place of birth. That's also a unique identifier for you. Your full name, registration number, and date on all pages. If there are insurance documents that you're submitting, contractor estimates that you're submitting, and there's a lot of paperwork, you would never want a situation where something exists on its own without being linked to you. That's where it's really important for you to have your information on every sheet of your FEMA appeal. Your contact information, complete details about your concerns and justification for the appeal. That language needs to be very specific. If you've been denied because there's insufficient damage, use the phrasing, I am appealing my home repairs assistance denial due to there being insufficient damage, and I am requesting an additional inspection. I cannot live in my home due to health, habitability, and safety concerns. That sentence, that way of phrasing things, tells FEMA immediately that you can't move into your home. I have contractor estimates showing the amount of damage, and then that's how you pair what you say in your FEMA appeal with the documents that support that. If, for example, you say, please, there's not actually a document that supports that way of stating things. So that's where being really concise, having someone to look over your FEMA appeal letter is really important, especially in those hours and days and weeks after disaster. The emotions are flowing. Sometimes the tempers can flare in terms of how long it feels like it can take, or all of the steps that are involved, just the sheer amount of paperwork. So really concise letter and details about the justification for your appeal are really important. And of course, you need to sign, and you need to have the proper documentation for the appeal. So this is what a basic FEMA appeal letter will look like. As you can see, the top left-hand corner has all of the information that we just went over. Dear FEMA, this is addressed to FEMA. Like I mentioned before, FEMA is not a charity, it's not a nonprofit, but there are compassionate people that work in FEMA that are going to be able to, that want to get you home. FEMA is an organization that, albeit is not perfect, but there's people who work within FEMA who will read what you're submitting to them. When you use the right language and have the right supporting documents that will move the process forward. I, and then state your name, am appealing specifically the monies that I receive for home repairs assistance, and I'm requesting an additional home inspection. Always request an additional home inspection. I'm concerned about living in my home due to safety and habitability reasons. If you did not have insurance coverage, this is where you state that. I did not have homeowners insurance on my home prior to the disaster event. This is how you tell FEMA, I do not have sufficient insurance, or I do not have any coverage for the damages that I've sustained in my house. State that you've attached the contractor estimates showing the extent of the damage, and that these damages are more than you've already received through FEMA. And then that's where you request This is where you bring out, more of you and what you're requesting from FEMA. I would like to be reconsidered for more home repairs assistance monies to help me rebuild my home. I hereby declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct. Here are some additional resources, and I just want to cover really quick when it comes to working through the FEMA process, that max grants for FEMA, you can receive up to $35,500 as a maximum grant for home repairs. And then there's other needs assistance, which you can also receive up to $36,000. Any storms that occurred in 2021, the max allowable grant for anyone that has applied for FEMA is $36,000. So you can continue to appeal until you've reached the maximum grant. And we've had plenty of clients that have done just that. Additional resources for folks as you're working through this process, disasterassistance.gov. This is the place to read through how FEMA lays out its process, what the appeal process looks like. You can go to FEMA.gov or call the 1-800 number. National Disaster Legal Aid, if you're working through things that are more difficult, you have legal questions. Acadiana is a nonprofit legal organization that helps homeowners with deed successions if you meet certain income requirements. And then, of course, the Louisiana Insurance Commissioner. If you're running up against insurance issues, not getting everything that you think that you deserve out of your insurance policy, there is an Office of Advocacy. And that's where you need to go if you need assistance with navigating your insurance. That if you can't get your declarations page, reach out to the Louisiana Insurance Commissioner, and you should be able to find that information on their website. All right, some of the tips, tricks, and frequently asked questions, and then we'll move through this and get to some question time. When it comes to working with FEMA, understand that there are certain ways that you need to phrase things. I hereby declare under penalty of perjury, for example. There's certain things that you need to include on every page. Your name, your FEMA registration number, the disaster code, the disaster name. Those things are always going to appear on your FEMA appeal and are really, really important. Not having those things makes it really difficult to move the whole process forward. It attaches you and your situation to every bit of your FEMA appeals process. Okay? Combine all your documents into one file. The way that you can describe damages to your friends and family are by photos, are by talking about it, talking about your experience, working through that. If you're working with a nonprofit or you have a case manager, that's where you really can let out some of that, some of the nuance and the specifics of your individual case. But when it comes to FEMA, take a step back, take a deep breath, have someone read over your FEMA appeal letter and make sure that you're being really, really specific about what you're appealing. And then you need to put everything into one file. Having everything in one file that you upload through your computer is going to be the way that you make sure that everything is included for your specific concern. For homeowners, always request an additional home inspection. And that doesn't just mean for home repairs. That doesn't just mean for ownership not verified. It also means for personal property, or if you have damages, or to say couches or your refrigerator or other personal properties items, because the extent of damage will be determined by that inspection. And it's not the same inspector every time. When you appeal, it kicks the ball forward for FEMA to verify their inspection with another inspection. And that's how you move that's how they are able to move everything forward. So when you appeal a decision, it kicks the ball to another FEMA inspector or inspection process to verify and go, okay, what you've described as your damages are really the damages. And because you requested an additional home inspection, FEMA is then obligated, if what you've put included in that letter is succinct and precise, to do an additional home inspection and then pick up the phone. Because FEMA is going to, especially in the world of COVID-19 and during the pandemic and certain circumstances when it comes to actually accessing your home, you need to be ready to answer the phone. Because when FEMA calls, once you've done this, and it's say been a week or 10 days or it's in that time right after you submitted something, you need to be ready to speak to a FEMA inspector to answer their questions, and that's how they're going to verify everything that you've described. Okay. So I haven't covered everything. If you have additional needs or questions, visit sbpusa.org/FEMA help. We're really building out this part of our website for homeowners, for renters, for anyone who needs assistance with FEMA appeals. SBP is more focused on home rebuilding, so want to put that to any of the renters that are on this call, but we're always available to answer those questions, especially at the in-person clinic that's coming up. But for any tips and tricks and to connect with us for free support, visit sbpusa.org/FEMA help. Few last things. It's been more than 60 days. There's no path forward. Like I mentioned earlier, there are compassionate people that work in FEMA. And when you can explain why, for example, it's been more than 60 days, I had to go make sure that my aunt who was in the hospital was recovering and okay. I was evacuated and couldn't get home to get all my documents. I had a family emergency that I had to attend to. It got lost, or whatever the reason is, state that in the letter, that you have a good reason for not appealing within those 60 days. Put it in the letter in a succinct way, explain it, submit it. It's never too late to move the ball forward. What qualifies for FEMA, what storm damages qualify for FEMA assistance? Oh, well, my favorite barbecue in the back was damaged. Maybe that's not eligible. My carport, whatever it is. If it did not affect essential living space, you may be determined ineligible for assistance. If, for example, that barbecue is the only way that you're being able to cook food, or that carport is where you've been living because inside you were having a termite treatment done before the storm, and then you couldn't move back inside, and that carport was where you were living. You can make a case. The options are open to FEMA to appeal. That doesn't guarantee that they are going to approve you for assistance, but the door is open to appeal if the circumstances can be explained succinctly and precisely. However, FEMA will tell you over and over again, essential living space, kitchens, bathrooms, bedrooms, those are the essential living spaces when it comes to working with FEMA. And that's what they're going to be looking at, right? If the paint was chipped, if that barbecue is just something that you have in the backyard, a fire pit, whatever it is, you need to remember that in navigating FEMA, that the important thing is the essential living space. Healthy, safe, and habitable home is what FEMA is concerned about in terms of getting you back into your home. Can you file for a family member? The answer is yes. FEMA needs written consent from that person in order to share information with them. At times that will mean that you need to submit a release of information form. Sometimes it can be tricky if you are denied based on dual registration status, meaning that two people have applied for the same address. And we had a client who had to work through this, that two family members applied on the same address, and then it stopped the whole FEMA process from moving forward. So if you're applying for a family member, make sure that you're talking with each other, that you're understanding who is going through the FEMA appeals process. And if you get hung up on on a dual registration status, then you need to talk to FEMA and appeal that decision, right? So make sure that as a family, as anyone who's been living in the home, that you're communicating with each other and that you understand who is filing for who, and that you have the appropriate written consent for FEMA to correspond with you. Accuracy is key. Can't have spelling errors. You can't have errors in terms of what you're submitting to FEMA. There's times where in post-disaster, you got a lot of contractors coming in and writing up estimates. Some people put it on, what amounts to a napkin or a slot of paper saying it's going to be $45,000 to rebuild your home. Or, oh, just looking at it, it's about $80,000. Not going to cut it. When it comes to accuracy in terms of working through the FEMA process, in terms of the contractor estimates, is really, really important. You need to have a breakdown. You need to have accurate information when it comes to working with FEMA. Make sure that the name, your name, is spelled correctly. And if it's spelled differently on one document or another, you need to explain why, right? If there's any discrepancy or difference between one document and another, and that's not uncommon. Sometimes last names can be written a certain way, or you've written in a certain way your whole life, and it appears as two different people. That needs to be addressed with FEMA. And you need to explain why it is that different information is appearing on different documents. All right, at this point, SBP, just to reiterate, our mission is to shrink time between disaster and recovery. And we're here as a resource, and we're just grateful to be working with United Way on delivering this, and want to open it up to questions. If there's specific needs, again, just want to reiterate the in-person clinic. You also have our FEMA help email here for specific questions. You can contact us here, but I'll turn it back over to Denise to open it up for some question time.
Yeah. Thank you, Evan. And actually, you've done such a fantastic job today that we actually just have a few questions for you. The first is, when will a homeowner know, what's the language that FEMA uses so that they know that their appeal process is really over? Is there any indication so that they know they need to keep going, or when that they're at the end of the road?
That's a great question. Understanding when you're at the end of the road is not always a straightforward thing. So we've had a lot of folks who have been waiting for FEMA to call, for the applicant, for your FEMA appeal to be processed. First thing to know is, if you've received $36,000 from FEMA, that's a good indication that you've received the maximum allowable grant for your specific need. However, if you feel like you're in limbo, if you feel like something's been pending for a really long time, that's where you can hop on the phone at the 1-800 and talk to someone at FEMA to ask what's going on. Number two, connect with an organization like United Way, SBP. Find someone who has access to a FEMA volunteer liaison so that they are able to ask the questions to FEMA directly to understand what's the holdup. Why do I feel like I'm in limbo right now? And if it feels like you're in limbo, think about how you submitted the appeal. Did I submit things all separately? Did I submit a bunch of photos? Was I specific? Was I in my letter? Did I go on and on and on for pages and pages and pages? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then it may be that you need to resubmit your FEMA appeal more succinctly with the appropriate documents. When it comes to home repairs, you need to make sure that you have a contractor estimate. When it comes to rental assistance, you need to fill out the continued temporary housing assistance form. When it comes to reimbursements, do you have proper receipts showing that you've paid a certain amount for, say, your storage container, and then submit those to FEMA. If you have, say, a FEMA trailer, and this is also a common issue, and you've been waiting for you to move in, one reason that we've seen that there's a holdup there is that the homeowner hasn't set up a second account with their electricity company to hook it up, or FEMA has actually been waiting on the homeowner to pick up their phone, right? So always be aware that you should be picking up your phone when FEMA calls. So when it comes to the end of the road, sometimes it's hard to see where where you're at, but we encourage everyone, appeal succinctly, appeal in a really concise way with the proper documents, and that's how we've been able to move the ball forward when it feels like you're at the end of the road. And then, of course, if you hit that $36,000 for home repairs or $36,000 for other needs assistance, that's where you've actually maxed out your eligible assistance from FEMA. But really important to find an advocate, to have people look over what you're doing, think about how you've submitted those documents, and that should be able to continue to move the FEMA appeals process forward, because FEMA will tell you, appeal, 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 appeal. So if it seems like there's a road ahead, take it.
Keep me off. Well, thank you, Evan. And I will say it's been very enlightening. I think I've learned a lot from you today, but I've got one more question, and I'm not sure. It's Daphne from YouTube. She's a renter. And so what assistance can you give her when all she's being told is there's no housing available for the people who may not own their home, but they're looking for places to rent or maybe get a FEMA home trailer at this point? Is there anything that suggestions that you could give for Daphne and those folks out there?
Let me think about an answer to this. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this, SBP is working primarily with homeowners. So our assistance has been to this point geared towards questions when it comes to home ownership. But if it comes to renters, if there's no housing available, well, number one, have you filled out your continued temporary housing assistance claim? If you're paying for, say, a hotel or a temporary shelter, if it seems like there's no housing available, call the 1-800 number and explain what's going on. Find an organization that's going to be able to work with a FEMA volunteer liaison to understand answers to those questions. And I would encourage this homeowner to come to our in-person clinic, and we're going to take some questions that we don't necessarily have all the answers to, and make sure that we have an answer for you if you come to us, or email us at FEMAhelp@sbpusa.org. We can look into it to you and then get you a more precise answer to that.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I think, again, I've learned so much from you just with our time today, but I think one of the most compelling things that you said is that, to me, it's that the word appeal to so many means denial. And it really isn't, is what you're saying, is that it just means a way to continue that conversation with FEMA. And I think that helps me feel a little better about the situation, knowing that that's a great way to look at it. So, but Evan, thank you so much for all of your sharing, all of your wisdom with us today. We definitely are looking forward to our event on Wednesday, the 28th. We're actually going to start at 10 a.m., but you do need an appointment because we're going to have, it's going to be a one-on-one situation. So we'll know we've got the right number of volunteers. And again, SBP and United Way will be there at the Civic Center to help families and people individually, case by case. So bring all of this wonderful paperwork that Evan's told you about today. Bring that with you. We will have laptops. We'll have Wi-Fi available. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to submit things directly to FEMA on your behalf with you sitting there with our volunteers. So again, Evan, thank you. And for all the folks at SBP, for all your support of our community, we greatly appreciate you guys. And again, we just want to remind everybody they can go to our website at unitedwayswla.org/FEMA clinic to register for that event on Wednesday, the 28th. So thank you. Greatly appreciate it, Evan. And we hope that everybody has a wonderful day. And if there's anything that you need from us, you can definitely reach out to us here at our office, or you can always reach all of the services available to you by simply calling 211 here locally in the Southwest Louisiana region. So thank you guys. Everybody have a safe afternoon.